lattes in that job.
I have a very kind of forensic way of working. Get hyper focused on one spot. I work in this one spot, and then I have to kind of go back and clean up around myself a little bit and go back to it. So that's kind of where I am now. I got to clean some of this stuff up. But we have the wiring mostly buttoned up. I've got to run one wire down to the starter. We have the headers on. The water pump is mounted. Got the little transfer hose on it. It's mounted. I've got to get 2 radiator hoses. I've got to get thermostat and some oil. And I gotta make me some kind of throttle bracket over here so I can work both carburetors at the same time. But we're getting close to firing this thing up. Now, I'm not saying we're getting close to driving, we're getting close to firing it up. And that's a big step. Once we get to where we can fire it up, then hopefully things can kind of chug along right behind that. You can see I write myself little notes. I put no oil on a piece of tape. It's on both sides of the motor. No water. I don't care how good you are. Every once in a while you forget something, and I don't want to forget anything that's going to cost me a motor. So I always make little notes to myself. Just one of those things I do. But the truck's coming along nicely. It really is. It won't be long till I'll have it sitting on the ground again. And yeah, looking forward to hearing this thing rumble. All right, so we keep talking about the budget build deal, and I'm going to go over the numbers. I got me a blank piece of paper up here because the other one had a bunch of scribbling on it and all, and we'll go over the numbers one by one so you can see what we had in mind. Now, keep in mind, we had it set up so it was a $3,000 budget build. You were allowed to spend hard cash $3,000. No more hard cash. But to help people out, the challenge was set up so that you were allowed to use up to $1,000 of parts you already had laying around by fair market value. You know, look on Marketplace, whatever you find stuff for, that kind of thing. So you're allowed to use $1,000 stuff you already had laying around. Now that works to my advantage because I do have a bunch of stuff laying around. But you'll see I didn't use a lot of it. And we also done $500 worth of free parts, because there's always going to be your buddies that want to say, hey man, I got this over here. If you want it, come get it. You can have it. So there's always going to be those buddies that want to help you out. Well, to make it fair, we put a price on that. We said $500 of free parts. And we did that for a reason, because the caliber of buddies you have and the caliber of buddies the guy down the street have may not be the same caliber of buddies. You know what I mean? I mean, you may be buddies with Ray Abraham, and he may give you a freaking motor. So we had to be realistic about it. So we put a $500 cap on fair market value again of used or free parts. So let's take a look at where we are knowing those numbers. So the first thing I'm gonna do is hard cash spent. So right here, it's hard to hold a camera and write at the same time. So right here, I'm gonna put down, we paid $1,800 for the truck. So we paid $1,800 for the truck. Now, the truck was fairly complete. Now, that's one of the big keys to doing this, is finding a vehicle that is fairly complete. So I didn't have to go out and hunt a bunch of stuff on the truck. But I did want to do a few things. You see me paint the firewall. Well, I painted that with just cheap old paint that I got at the dollar store. So I put $10 in paint on the truck. Cheapest paint job you'll ever see. All right. So I did take the motor and freshen it up. So I put new bearings in the motor, put about $70 in bearings. So we put about $70 in bearings in the motor. That's main bearings and rod bearings. And while I was in there, I put a new timing chain in there. Timing chains All right. Now, you seen in an earlier video where we went to Summit and managed to find a clutch kit, on the shelf in their little discount area, which helped us out tremendously. And you know how hard it is to write upright on the wall? I never realized that was a challenge before till now. And you also seen we got that radiator from the same spot. Wow, we got the radiator from the same spot, from that cell area. Now, the other day we went to the local parts store and picked up the cheapest set of plug wires we could find, and they run us around $30. All right. We also picked up a oil filter. Spent about $10 on the oil filter. All right, so that's the hard cash that we've spent on this truck. That comes to, so that's right, it comes to $2,213 of hard cash spent. Now, that means that we have $787 left of hard cash that we can spend on this truck. So you see, we've not spent the $3,000 yet that we have on this thing. Now, let's look at some of the other parts that we put into this thing. What about the stuff that we already had laying around here? Well, and some of this stuff, actually, all of this stuff didn't have to be done, but I done it because, well, I had it laying around here. So let's go down here. Some nicer valve covers. Had a brain fart there for a minute. I put some nicer valve covers on it, and valve covers are going up in value now. I'll be generous with them and say they were worth $100. I don't know that I would have sold them for $100, but, and I changed the cam. I went with a cam that I already had laying here, and a used, let's face it, used cam and lifters, especially flat tappet stuff, is you probably couldn't give it away. But again, I'll be generous and say it was $100. Now, the intake I already had laying here. We went over that in a previous video. I bought that on Marketplace, and the only reason I bought it is because it was a smoking deal, in my opinion. So I already had it laying here, and I bought it off Marketplace, and I paid $350 for it on Marketplace. Those intakes are not very desirable, though, because they are the ones that only fit the Edelbrock carburetor. So not a lot of people want them, but I thought it was kind of a cool deal, and it looked cool too. And at the time, I didn't have nothing to put it on, but this was the perfect project for it. So $550 right there, $550 in pre-owned parts right there. What about parts that were given to us? Well, and again, none of these parts really this truck had to have, but those steel wheels that you see on it that were painted, and we'll say they're worth about $50. They're just factory forged steel wheels. And then another thing that, oh, well, let's look at this, the oil pan. Oil pan, a buddy of mine, I'm gonna say about $50. A buddy of mine was building a motor and actually had some issues and didn't need the oil pan anymore. So that was actually given to me before this project ever started. It was something I had laying around here. I should have guessed I used it in a pre-owned, but it was a freebie. It was given to me. Now this is one that there was no reason to put in this motor, but I'll explain this one. I changed the rods in it, and I'm gonna say these rods are worth about $100. So $200 in freebie parts. Now, let me explain some things real quick. So let me explain a couple things real quick. One, some of the things I put on here, I didn't have to put on here, like the valve covers. Honestly, the valve covers that were on this engine were perfectly fine, but these valve covers that are on here are correct for a 63 year model in a car anyway. So I kind of wanted them on here, and they're nice. And you can see I got valve covers hanging out the wazoo. So it's nice to use some of them sometimes. And this just seemed like a good project to put those on. So I didn't have to put those on there. So realistically, that could have come off here. The intake, I didn't need that intake on here, but it was laying on the shelf and it looks cool on that engine. You know what I mean? So I didn't have to put that on there. Honestly, I didn't have to put the cam in there, but I had a cam laying on the shelf, and it's actually the Rattler cam, I think it is. So it just would sound good, you know, just adding a little cool factor to the sound and the look, and also it looks as the sound and look kind of match, you know. Yeah, but I didn't have to do it. I could have left a stock cam in this thing, so I didn't have to spend that money on the give me parts. I didn't have to change the wheels, but honestly, this truck has such a killer look with these wheels on it that in my mind, I could not change these wheels. I could have left the old chrome wheel that was on it when you see me when I pulled it up on a trailer in an earlier video, and wouldn't have had to spend anything on it. But again, I wanted the steel wheels because I thought it would look cooler. So most of the parts that I had on the shelf and most of the give me parts, all those could have went away and nothing about this truck would have changed. And you would have still only had $2,200 in this build as it sits. Now, the rods. I said I'd talk about that. So here's the deal with the rods. There is no reason to change the rods that was in the motor. None. Zero. Absolutely nothing. But there is a kind of a iconic racing legend in our area, Mr. Gene Cromer. And he passed away a few years back. And he ran a speed shop, and he was an FE guy, raced FEs for those that don't know, in the Racing Hall of Fame. But he lived about a mile up the road from me. I had gotten parts off him in the past and all. After Mr. Gene Cromer passed away, his place sat over there for a few years, and they decided it was time to clean some stuff up. They called me and they gave me a couple things because they knew I was a huge fan of him and I thought the world of the man. And one of the things they gave me was just a set of rods that was laying on the shelf. Now, we don't know what those rods came out of. We don't know what those rods were intended for. Don't know anything about them other than what they are, and they're actually C3 rods. So again, they kind of date coded correct for the truck. They're 63 rod. 390 rods. Nothing really special about the rods. But I wanted to put them in this engine just because of the provenance of where they came from. They were something that come from Mr. Cromer, and I wanted them in here just because they belong to him. No other reason. Nothing about them was actually special in any way. But there was something that I wanted to do just because they came from him. And, you know, it's one of those things that it means something to me. It wouldn't mean nothing to anybody else. So with that being said, let's look back at this list again. So as we just talked about it, that means pretty much everything in this section and this section could have all went away. It wouldn't have been nothing to it. And you could have put this truck together for $2,213 as it sits. Now, that seems wild because it's hard to think of anything you can put together for decent money anymore. But there's a trick to it. And let's look at it this way. Even if you bought these parts and you know, you would have went over to $3,000, but even if you'd bought everything on here, $550 and $200 is $750. 27, 8, 9, 29, 29, 6, actually, 750, 7, 8, 9, 29, 2963. Oh, you would only been to 2963. You would still be less than $3,000 if you bought everything here. You'd still been under $3,000 in this truck so far. This goes back to something I had mentioned in an earlier video. One is pick something when you start that is both low cost, inexpensive, cheap, whatever word you want to use, but is as complete as you can find. Because here's the thing about it. Even if I didn't want to use anything on this truck and all I wanted was the cab, bed, and doghouse. If that's all I wanted and I was going to build from scratch, everything on here has value that could have been sold, and that money could have been put into the other stuff, and you still could have built a fairly cheap vehicle. So think that way, first off. And second off is patience. There's a lot of people out there give me a hard time about stuff like this truck because it takes me 6 months to build something like this. And they're over there talking about, I built mine in a week. I built mine in 3 weeks. Okay, but you spent a lot of money for the convenience of doing it quick. Whereas patience pays off in the end. In the house and get my lovely assistant ready to fire old Waylon off. Got crudely everything there to make it crank up. I don't have the cooling system hooked up or anything, so we can't run it for just a minute. But the ignition switch, it has a funny spot in it. So I've just run me a wire to touch the battery for the starter motor only. And let's see what happens. Probably gonna shake itself apart. All right, hit it.
That's on supposed to do, right?
Yeah. What's going on? If it starts up, you take it away from it. That's the starter button now.
Okay.
That's good. At least we got to hear it run.
I don't think I can hear anything else. He's kind of loud.
Well, there's no mufflers on it.
Oh. What do I do with the starter up now?
Lay it down some more.
What do you have to do to fix it?
So yeah, we know it cranks, we know it runs, and it has to be touched. Now I just need to clean all this up, put the exhaust on it, and actually get the switch where it's working. But I know it crank and run now. That's a big relief. Well, there's no cooling system hooked up, so I couldn't let it run long. And honestly, I don't even have a fuel line hooked up yet. I had filled the bowls up with gas just to try to fire it off, and it's alive. It runs. It's got, I think I said 60 pounds of oil pressure right there in that little blip. So motor's healthy, sounds good. Actually sounds kind of rowdy. Kind of expected that though, honestly, with the cam and all that's in it. So Waylon lives. It's alive. We finally got to hear it run. Of course, still some wiring to do. I had a mini high torque starter on it for some reason. The starter was good. I put it on the shelf. I put it back on here. It's no good. I have no idea what happened. I took it off and checked it. Sure enough, it's just not working. It won't even bench run. So I have no idea what happened to it. Whatever it was happened, just laying on the shelf. I got no explanation for that one. So we stuck a stock 360 pickup truck motor starter on it, and it runs. Now, it's a big starter, and it's close to the header, so I don't know how long it'll live. But that just requires some different wiring than what I've done, because the race starter has the built-in solenoid on top of it and all, so you have a power wire and excite wire, all that on top of the starter, whereas this Ford starter just has one wire that goes up and it's supposed to go to a solenoid switch on the firewall and over. So I had to do a makeshift hot wire kind of thing to work that, because it's not how I had the switch set up. So I gotta work on a little bit of wiring to clean that up to make it work, but we're gonna let it live like this because that works. Still to do, we got to put radiator hoses on, put a belt on it, put an alternator on it. I've got to put mufflers on it. It's got straight pipes on it right now, so I got to put mufflers on it, and I got to put a drive shaft in it, run a fuel line. But that's it. I mean, it's really the basic stuff now. The truck is alive. The engine sounds healthy. I've waited a long time to hear this engine run, and finally get to hear it run, and it sounds healthy. So now it's all about getting it put together, or getting all the rest of the things put on it and tuned in real good. But she's there, and that's a big step for this truck. Well, the windshield's dirty, but man, isn't it nice to look out over the hood and see that? I also just realized that I have a giant vacuum port right there that I never capped off. So I fired it up with a massive vacuum leak. Great. It was just about firing it and hearing it run anyway, so we got to do that. I'm happy now. I'm relieved. I feel better about the day, and quite honestly, I think I'm gonna call it a day, because there were some stressful moments in there. But it's alive. And I know I had went to a format where I was doing a video a week, and they were long, hour-long videos, but there's no way that I couldn't put a video out there of this truck with a running engine. It has been a long road, and we finally got there with it. And is it ready to drive? No. Is it finished? No. But for me, the exciting part is to hear that engine right there make noise. I have never heard that make noise, and that was a good feeling. That was a good feeling. So we feel good about it. You know, there's not much I can say. I'm pretty happy right now. Waylon is alive. What's next for Waylon? Well, it's not a lot. Honestly, I'm gonna fix the wiring and stuff that I need to for that starter and the relay and all that. I'm gonna fix that wiring, and after I fix that wiring, then I'll test that to make sure that works. I'm gonna hook the cooling system up, and we'll probably run a hose over in a jug, fire it up and let it run, and make sure it doesn't run hot or anything like that. Then it's probably gonna be on the back burner for a little while. I have to get the wagon. Let's see, where's it at? The wagon. I have to get the wagon inside the shop because we're taking the wagon on power tour, and I got a lot to do to that wagon. So I've got to get the wagon inside the shop and get to work on it. And I still have a motor to finish in between these two. So yeah, there's a lot to do. So I'm probably going to put the brakes on Waylon for at least a week and then come back to it. But in the meantime, while the brakes are on, I'm going to be trying to dig up a drive shaft for it. And once we get the drive shaft in, of course, then it's to the point where we can actually yard drive it around and check on a few things. But Waylon is close. Waylon is alive. I'm going to say it again. Waylon is alive. And we are overjoyed. That wasn't a lot of noise, but we made noise, and that's what we was after. And man, I'm telling you, we are excited about the possibilities for this truck. Y'all have a great holiday. Today is a Memorial Day. Y'all have a great holiday, but remember why we have a day like this, and remember the reason for it. God bless y'all. I love each one of you. Thank you for subscribing to the channel if you have. If you have not, please do. It's a great, tremendous help to us and helps us get stuff like this done. So, hope the Lord bless you today more than he did yesterday. We'll see you next time.
I'd say it's a nut job.